Welcome to the Best of Bumper to Bumper podcast. I'm Justin Gard. This podcast is for Wednesday, May 13th. If you're looking for the entire show podcast, it's still available on the entire show podcast on this very same channel. We're going to hear from Pat Kessler coming up in a little bit. We're going to hear from Chip Scoggins coming up in a little bit, talking about college sports and PJ Fleck and Gopher football recruiting and much more. But we started the show talking about pictures of famous and infamous moments in sports history, and we're trying to localize it over the next couple of weeks.
I mentioned early that we are indeed a picture is worth at least 1,000 words leader. I don't know who first came up with that cliche, because then it wasn't a cliche, right? I mean, whoever came up with it first, it was fresh. Back then, it was fresh. A picture is worth 1,000 words.
The rumor is it was an advertising executive, Fred Bernard, to promote his agency's ads, took out an ad in Printer's Ink in 1921.
1921.
With the headline, "One look is worth 1,000 words."
Look at that.
And then he attributed it to an ancient Japanese philosopher.
So he
maybe gave credit. He confirmed it.
If he was culturally appropriating, he at least fessed up to it. Give that to him.
Exactly. Fred
Did he
Bernard.
have any Minnesota connections that we know of? Any relatives? Or might he be from here?
Sounds like he's from here. Being modest like that and not taking credit for something?
That's probably true. It's been repeated early and often ever since that particular individual, if it is his deal, came up with it. And I think there's a lot of truth to it. I think a lot of people feel that one photo can convey an awful lot about a given event in a way where you say, well, I don't need to read anything more about it. I don't need the media jackals to expound upon what that photo captures. And to that extent, among the media exercises that have been attempted nationally, somebody came up with the idea of, okay, give me your favorite, give me the greatest sports photo of all time. And I saw our guy Rick Bozich respond. I don't remember who it was who got this thing started, but our guy Rick Bozich responded and linked to a mythic photo. It's so good and so rich on so many levels, and it's the photo of Muhammad Ali, after having knocked down Sonny Liston, standing over Liston with a snarl on his face. It's a tremendous photo. It is, for whether you're around then or not, it conveys. Even if you don't know that much about boxing or that much about Ali, there's so much conveyed within that squared circle and that photo. And I, off the top of my head, agreed with Bozich. And within no time, other people then were tweeting at me with photos they think are worthy of that same discussion. At least one of them, I think there are actually two different ones from the Miracle. I think one was the winning goal against the Commies, and I think the other was the celebration when I don't know if it was the celebration. I assume it was the celebration when we actually won the gold, because we had to win one more game, as I recall. And it got me to thinking a little bit. I haven't even named the bit yet, but I think we can develop this, whether it's COVID-19 winter or not, into something that could be entertaining, perhaps informative, and certainly a lot of fun. Because if we're going to limit the discussion to, let's not make it national, let's make it Minnesotan.
Localize it.
Let's localize the story. There are myriad great images that we could recall, that we could tell the story of, and we could convey really what that photo tends to capture. And at the top of the list was one that one of the tweeters responding to me brought up within seconds of me mentioning the Liston one, because I was thinking more global at that point. And I'm not necessarily here, I don't think we need to rank them, but I think we should try to find maybe one a week and explore, review the photo itself, maybe put it online, talk about it a little bit in terms of what it conveys. And the beauty of this is, in this case, unlike the calendar of calamity, it doesn't have to be heartbreak. It can be, but it does not have to be cataclysmic necessarily. But me being Pollydana,
I feel like it's going to hedge that way.
No, not Pollydana. The
Danny
opposite
Downer.
of Danny Downer.
Yep.
Well, because he brought it up, and
You immediately thought heartbreak.
well,
I did too.
he put it in my head.
Yeah, well, usually
Because it's
when we
such a good
localize it, we make it more negative from time to time.
It's such a good one, and it goes back to 1999. Inside a building that no longer exists. The Metrodome and the Weeping Blondes.
Yeah.
Responding to the 15-1 Vikings losing to the 14-2 Atlanta Falcons to not reach what we all assumed was their right, the Super Bowl that year. In terms of agony of defeat, in that category, I'm not sure there's any better place to start than the so-called Weeping Blondes photo. And for those unfamiliar, it was a Star Tribune shot of, I think I have their names here somewhere. I've almost forgotten them over the years. Heidi Owens, Kendra Spencer, and Jennifer Huffman. And they were three of the four women who came to be known as the Weeping Blondes, who long after it looked like the rest of the stadium had evacuated, everybody was gone, they could still be found in the crowd with various looks of utter and complete, is it despondency or despondence? Whatever it is, they were not happy.
Mm-hmm.
They captured, with their expressions, with their weeping, what every Minnesota Vikings fan felt like after that cataclysmic, shocking, you still can't make it up loss, correct?
I still feel like that. I don't even need to see the Weeping Blondes picture, and I can still feel like that pretty much on demand almost 30 years later.
Yeah, it was...
or 20.
Apparently that photo made its way, eventually, it's at the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
So we're represented there.
So we are... Yeah,
that team.
That team is represented.
Yeah.
We didn't get to the Super Bowl, but we made it to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And the beauty of it was that, by the way, the photographer was Brian Peterson, Star Tribune. And that was the front page image used, the Strib, that day on that particular occasion after that particular game. And it absolutely conveyed it because, let's be honest, the beauty of a great photo is it's not staged, or it doesn't look staged. It looks organic. It doesn't appear that the people in it they're not self-consciously thinking about, a selfie. It's
candid.
You're catching them at a moment, an unvarnished moment of joy in some cases, because there's some good ones from the 87 Twins, from the 91 Twins, or utter and complete agony. And that was, we all wrote that day. I wrote, Sid wrote, Royce wrote. We all wrote off of that game, but you could make the argument none of us needed to. Once we saw that photo, we could have said, we'll just
call it quits.
Call it a day. Not any point. We were at the game. That's great. We'll do a follow the next day or the day after. Do we really need anything else other than that photo, which captured pretty much everything that not only, by the way, fans were feeling, but also what Vikings players were feeling? I mean, Chris Carter practically had to be carried back to the Vikings locker room. He was so devastated and gobsmacked by that finish. He, like everybody, thought, we're entitled. This is ours. There's nothing going to stand in the way of us at this point, right?
Every single time the 1998 NFC Championship game comes up or the 2009 NFC Championship game come up, yeah, I get depressed. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about the pictures. I don't want to remember it. But Dan has a way of bringing that out in all of us, doesn't he? I appreciate everybody who's submitted photos that we're going to use here for the next couple of weeks. We're going to hear from Pat Kessler in a few minutes to discuss what the governor is outlining today as it pertains to the stay-at-home order, when businesses can open and all of those things. But our old buddy Chip Scoggins joined the show today to talk a lot about college athletics, when the season may start when it comes to football, how all the different conferences are handling, all the different ramifications. Always good to have our buddy Chipper on the show. He joined today.
Where were you in 1999 when the Vikings lost to the Falcons in the NFC title game?
I was in Chicago preparing to come here. I moved here in January 1st of 2000. So
you barely missed it. You were on your way here. We were talking about the Weeping Blondes photo, which I'm sure you are familiar with. That conveyed everything you needed to know about that game, and it's leading us into a broader discussion, maybe even getting into bit mode to examine a famous or infamous Minnesota sports photo over the course of the coming weeks. Does any image come to your mind? I know I'm kind of hitting you cold on that. Any particular, and by the way, it doesn't have to be cataclysmic. It can be joyous, because we've had a few of those too. Any photo that comes to mind from any event you either covered or you were here for?
Yeah, I would say in my I guess it's almost 5 years or 20 years now, 20 and a half years now, probably the Andrew Burnett goal in Colorado.
Ah, yeah.
His reaction shot with the mouth wide open, the stunned disbelief they had just knocked off the Colorado in that playoff series. So I think that's probably, just off the top of my head,
that's a good one.
That's probably the one that jumps out to me.
That's a hidden one. That's a very good one. And, of course, in some ways it ends up being painful for people because it kind of points out that was more than a few years ago. And, we haven't had a bunch of those since. It's like part of the problem we've had, putting big games in Minnesota Wild history on, postseason. They ain't that many, Chip. That's the sad reality of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm sure we could find some agony of defeat from my time covering the Vikings. I'm sure there, 2009 or from the championship game. I'm sure there's a shot there that kind of sums up how that went.
That's a good question. I
don't know if there was one though.
I don't remember a photo necessarily. Guardsy, do you remember a photo off of that game?
Off of the Favre game? Yeah, I mean, there's like the one where he's getting high load is good.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
there's also, I think he puts his hands on his head after he threw the pick. There's some right there in the aftermath of the interception of Favre that you could find. Or laying on the ground after being bloodied.
Our guy, Dan Wenisota, who has helped us develop the calendar of calamity that he's now turning into a book, I don't think I'm out of turn in saying I got a little bit of a sneak peek at some parts of it, and one of the photos is wide left related, and it's a I think a hidden gem from that game in that it's got this sort of dumbstruck look of shock on the face of Gary Anderson. And I kind of remembered that photo once I saw it, where it's just sort of like this, it's almost like a half grin, half, what? I missed it? Yeah. How is that even possible that I missed it? But, of course, he indeed did. Let's talk a little college sports with you, because you've written a lot about that recently, before you wrote about the Jordan Opus. You're very well connected on this stuff locally, and no one knows when we're coming back and all of that. But to the larger issue of how college sports are going to look, and how many of these sports can survive, and how the budget gets put back together, what would you say to folks who are kind of wondering about that, even if we don't exactly know when we're going to start playing again?
I would say pray there's a college football season, because if there's not, sports are going to get cut. I mean, there's just no other way around it. And if you looked at the presentation that Mark Cole gave to the Board of Regents last week, their moderate scenario, not even their worst case scenario, but their moderate scenario would be a $30 million loss. And that's if sports come back in the fall, but without fans. And I don't think anybody in college wants that because they need that ticket revenue. But if sports start on time in the fall but without fans, they estimate that they'll lose $30 million. And Rhonda McFarland, who's the CFO of Gopher Athletic Department, she said there's only a handful of schools that could handle a $30 million loss at this point. And so these schools absolutely need a college football season. They need that revenue to keep their departments afloat. And so, but that's the challenge, Dan, is that when you look at FBS, there's 130 FBS schools in 41 states. Well, they're not all going to operate on the same timeline. It's just, that's unrealistic to think that's even a scenario. And so I'm trying to figure out when this thing's going to start. Are fans going to be allowed? Is it going to be a shortened season? Unlike the professional leagues where you have a union and 30 teams, I mean, you're trying to juggle 130 schools in different states that are going to operate on different timelines. So I don't know how they're going to make it work, to be honest with you.
Do we know exactly how much of the Big Ten network money we get regardless of whether there's a season? Do we get none of that? Are we assured of a certain percentage of it, or do we even know the answer to that?
I think that's what they're trying to figure out and then negotiate, because when you look at it, schools didn't get all the money from the NCAA tournament revenue that they thought they were going to get.
That's right.
And that's a contract that's finite. And so I think they're probably talking to their TV partners to say, look, are we going to get the same cut if there's a 10-game season? Because I think that's one option that's on the table, is just playing a shortened season and eliminating some of the non-conference games and playing just conference games. And so I don't know that they know yet how much revenue will be cut if the season is affected, but I would think that they're probably not going to get the full freight if the season's disrupted.
Is there a chance that, let's be clear here, there's some states that are being a lot more aggressive, at least for the moment, about opening things up than others. And so you hear these comments all the time out of the SEC, like, well, you know what? We'll just play each other forever. No one else wants to play. That's fine. We're not afraid. We're going to play. Is that a scenario you could envision where literally some conferences are open for business, whether they should be or not, and others are going to be shut down because in large measure their own decisions are dictated to a certain degree about what the landscape is in the particular state in which their schools reside?
I think it could be. I absolutely think it could be. And a larger question, too, is what happens if you have three schools in a conference that are not open and they're not going to play? Are you going to go ahead and eliminate them, or is the conference going to stay unified and say every team has to play, or we go ahead and if we had, let's say, 11 teams out of the 14. Because you look at Rutgers, Dan, right now in New Jersey, they're getting they're one of the hardest hit states, and I'm not sure that they're going to be in a position to open up anytime soon. And so is Rutgers, if let's say Rutgers or another school says we're not going to be ready for football in the fall, is the Big Ten going to say, well, we'll just go ahead and play without you? That's a decision they have to make. But I absolutely could see, that an SEC or another conference saying, you know what, if everybody's not, going to be uniform, we'll just play each other and we'll have our own mini championship here. We'll have our own little playoff, and because they want that revenue and they want to return to sports. Do
you get any feel when you talk to people out of the SEC whether what they envision there, if indeed there is football, is, well, we might not play to full stadiums, but we ain't going to play to empty stadiums? What are you hearing in that regard?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think that's across the board. I asked Mark Cole that last week, because they're having daily conversations amongst ADs and coaches, and I said, what is the appetite for playing in stadiums with no fans? And he said early on there was interest in that, just so they could start on time, but he said of late there's been less appetite about that they don't want to play in empty stadiums. And so I think the Big Ten is even coming around to the fact that they need that ticket revenue. They need that scholarship seating donations. And so I think it'd be more, you'll see social distancing guidelines, and maybe you won't have 100% capacity, but they feel like 60% or whatever the number is better than no fans.
Is it possible, let's say there is no football anywhere, the season ends up getting washed out, or they hope that they can resurrect something in the spring. There have been some plans about that thrown out. I don't know how seriously they've been considered, but they've been talked about. So let's say you literally skip a fall of football entirely. Do you believe there's any chance that what we've come to know as this incredible acceleration of the number of coaches, largely related to football, basketball to a degree, but certainly football, and the salaries skyrocketing, et cetera, that there could be a major mid-course correction in that regard, or do you think that's never going to change no matter what?
Well, I think the arms race in general for college sports is over, or is going to be impacted. But the thing you have to weigh on this, Dan, is football's the king moneymaker. I mean, that is the one thing that is the one area where you can make a lot of money at. And so I would be hesitant to really slash your budget in football, because that's where you get your revenue from. And so now, is there going to be bidding wars for defensive coordinators, pushing the salaries up and up and up? I think that's going to get slowed down a little bit. But I don't think I think ADs are going to look more at how can they contain costs in other sports, whether it's travel, whether it's scheduling, whether it's cutting sports. Because I just think they look at football as that's the one thing that keeps their departments afloat. And if you start really whacking into the budgets there and taking away from that and weakening your football operation, you're going to severely impact how much you can make. And so maybe the salaries will have a little bit of correction. Maybe you won't see, coordinators making $2.5 million. But I think just the emphasis on football, I'm not sure that's going to see a significant change.
Could recruiting be revolutionized in a way that folks who do this for a living suggest? We didn't plan this, and we didn't want it to be this way, but what we discovered is maybe we should be all along be doing a lot more virtual recruiting, and perhaps then also saving a lot of money as well. It certainly appears that P.J. Fleck is very well positioned to excel if indeed that becomes more the norm. Is there any chance it becomes more the norm?
I don't think so. I think coaches will still argue there's nothing that can completely match bringing a prospective player on campus and having that face-to-face contact and, being able to sit in the office with them and show them around the campus. And so maybe there's components of it, and obviously Fleck and his staff has really maximized it with their creativity and technology and FaceTiming and all that. But I think if you gave coaches the choice of, would you still want to do a lot of this virtually, or would you rather have the player on your campus and show them around and show them all the bells and whistles in person? I still think once they open it up, we're going to see recruiting go back to the way it was.
We've had, I think it's now 5 4-star recruits commit to a Fleck in the University of Minnesota. Again, that's dangerous stuff. We've seen how those ratings lie. Sometimes they're deceptive. We've learned that over and over and over. On the other hand, there's not a coach out there who would say, no, I would prefer to turn down 4-star recruits. You play the odds, you still got a better chance that you're going to get some good people. So is this what you expected? Are we seeing the dawning of the age of Aquarius here? How excited should Gopher fans get about a trend in that, we're not very accustomed to this program being able to pull that off?
Yeah, it feels like they're turning the corner, and I think we're seeing that because now PJ can sell tangible results. His first couple of years, he's just selling a vision, an idea, right? But he's building something. But when you win 3 games or 5 games or 7 games, it's a tougher sell. But when you win 11 games and you're on game day and you beat Auburn and you have these a lot of things that you've never done in that program's history, now you can go sell that. And so it's more real what you're building. And so I think this is just kind of a slingshot effect of winning and having a historic season last year, and then coupling that with, he's always going to be an aggressive recruiter, and he's really good at it. And so now he has the ammunition to sell. And so I don't think this is just going to be a blip. I think this feels like real momentum, both for the program and recruiting, that I think they'll continue to build upon.
Chip Scoggins, sports columnist for the Star Tribune. Let's finish up with a little bit of the baseball situation. it appears as if there's a chance that the owners and players are going to be battling here over what's the right slice of the pie. The players are saying you're 50-50 split. Suddenly you're trying to institute a salary cap in a sport that has been able to resist that. I mentioned yesterday that even though technically the owners are backing away from what they had said earlier, I'm not sure if the players care about public relations at all.
Yep.
I don't think they can win. The only way I think they have a chance to win is if they make it sound as if their hesitation and their reluctance has more to do with whether the safety issues have been dealt with than the money part of it. I just think they'll get obliterated on the money. What do you think about that, and where is this headed? Do you think in the end cooler heads will prevail, and if indeed the safety stuff gets cleared, that they'll find a way to manufacture a half season?
Yeah, it's going to be horrendous optics if you have billionaires and millionaires fighting over money in this climate with people losing their jobs. And if I was the leadership of the players' union, I would tell the players, hey, privately, that might be our biggest issue, but publicly, we're going to say it's the health thing.
Yep.
Because you're going to lose on that front. I mean, no one's going to have an appetite for you guys arguing and not having a season because of money. And so the owners, submitting that proposal, it basically put the players in a bad spot because the players have resisted the salary cap, and so they knew that if they resist on this, they're going to be the losers in the court of public opinion. So, but I have to think at the end of the day, they're going to realize they cannot waste this season. They cannot lose this season if money is the biggest issue. Now, the health concerns, that's legitimate. If there's enough players that say, you know what, we don't want to be quarantined away from our families, or we're not comfortable with whatever the plan is to come up to keep us safe, that's one thing. I mean, that's completely understandable, and I think fans would understand that, but they're not going to understand if they can't come to agreement over money. I mean, that's just not going to play well. And so I think at the end of the day, it may take a couple of weeks, it may take a month, but I think eventually the two sides will reach an understanding on the financial component. And, I think there will be baseball starting in July.
You do think so?
I do. I think there's enough appetite for both sides. If the safety precautions are in place and the plan is solid, and what we don't know is what happens if they do return to play and all of a sudden you see a second wave and you see a lot of players starting to test positive. What are they going to do then? And how many? What's kind of the threshold where they say, you know what, we tried and this is not going to work. We have to, disrupt the season, stop it again. That's what they want to avoid. But I do think they'll find some agreement that allows them to get on the field in July.
Always fun to have Chip Scoggins on with Dan Barreiro, been a friend of ours for many, many years. Nobody knows college sports in particular better than Chip, and now that he's a columnist, he can cover everything. You just heard it there, NFL, basketball, and wrapping up with Major League Baseball. Nobody knows politics better than Pat Kessler. It's Wednesday, which means it's time for Special K.
I wish the American media would take a great look at the views of the people in Congress and find out, are they pro-America or anti-America?
Pat Kessler. Because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
I can't trust Obama. He's an Arab.
Pat Kessler.
Tear down this wall.
I did nothing wrong at the Minneapolis airport.
Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
Pat Kessler.
And now, to help Dan break down all the tough questions in politics, it's our own
Pat Kessler.
Political Wonk.
I feel like a supermodel, except like times 10.
It's Channel 4's
Pat Kessler
with Dan Barreiro on the Fan.
Chris from North Dakota, Guardsy, wants to know if we even understand what an acre is. He thinks because we're city slickers, you don't understand. You even know what an acre. You know what?
Well, what does that mean?
The farm boy in him will know.
The farm boy will know.
Pat Kessler on the Whiting Clinic LASIK and Cataract hotline. How many acres did you have on your farm?
We had a very small farm. We had 240 acres.
So think about that. That's small. 240 acres.
That is correct. We had a small farm, and an acre, it's hard to explain this, but it's 100 It's 1/640th of a square mile. I'm not making that up.
That seems a complicated way to describe it.
There's got to be a more efficient way to describe that, isn't there?
Well,
1/640th.
It's a big piece of land.
I like that better. It's just a big piece of land.
Now, I'm thinking, I live on a city lot,
mm-hmm.
and I don't have a lot of land, but, I mean, it's almost like a block.
Right.
A city block.
Okay. Yeah, it makes you mean your property's a city block. No, you mean an acre would be a city block.
I think that's what you said.
An acre would be a city block.
Yeah,
so,
makes sense.
I don't know, man. It's like you're throwing this at me. It's like 40,000 square feet.
1 acre?
Yep.
40,000 square feet. Are you sure?
That's kind of what I remember from back in the day.
That's close enough for us. We're not going to be able to challenge you on that because we're city slickers.
Well, yeah, let's have our listeners
simplify
weigh in
for
on
us.
This. But yeah, we had 240 acres.
So more than Zimmer's Ranch. Zimmer's Ranch is 160 acres. Do you think you would feel squeezed if you're Mike Zimmer and 2 out of his 3 kids, I think, quarantining on 160 acres? Because that's what he talked about today.
Well, if he has outbuildings, no problem. But on draft night, I saw the Zimmer Ranch.
Yeah.
I mean, you had all of those animals hanging on the wall.
Most of them dead.
Most of them.
Yeah.
And I'm going, holy crap. And so I got to believe that Zimmer has got a lot of outbuildings, as we like to call them.
He can. I think he can spread out a little bit. Tony says 644 acres equals a square mile.
Okay, there it is.
That doesn't make any sense.
But that doesn't really put it in perspective for us. Doesn't put it like
1 acre. Now Terrence writes 1 acre equals 43,560 square feet.
Okay, I said 40,000.
Did you really?
Yeah, you nailed it. You hit it.
Yeah,
you had the fraction.
Yeah, you were in the ballpark at least. Isn't that amazing how that came back to you? I guess you never lose the farm boy in yourself.
I've never lost.
You never will.
So I look at some of these people who have, and an acre is pretty big.
Yes.
100 acres is huge. Our farm was 240 acres, and I could barely escape it. My cousins in the Fargo-Moorhead area up there, they got 2,000 acres.
Wow, that's a compound.
Yeah, and in the summers, we used to work on bonanza farms, on the big old wheat farms in North Dakota.
Who would have thunk that?
And those are 10,000 acres. So think about this. There's a lot of land out here. And not a lot of COVID on all that land, by the way. It's
that you know of.
Kind of the end of the world, and you can just look forever down.
1 acre
land up there.
of land is roughly equivalent to a football field without the end zones. Is that right? That sounds small for me.
No, that's about right.
About right? Okay.
Yeah, that seems about right.
Is it 600? Okay, so that would be 300 yards would be 900, or 100 yards would be 300 feet, so 2 football fields, sure.
If you calculate the entire area of a football field, including the end zone, it works out to 57,600 square feet. 1 acre equals 43,560 square feet. Now, this includes the end zones in this case. So a football field is about, if you include the end zones, 1.32 acres in size. There you have it.
That is fantastic. Yeah. Okay, that puts it in perfect perspective. Right there. Size of a football field.
There's no doubt about that. 6 o'clock, the governor is speaking. Before we get to what you think he's going to say, can we assume that because he's moved his talk from the usual time, that he felt it was, important to reach more people because it was going to be a little bit more momentous? Why the change in time?
Well, he has been holding these press conferences, Governor Walz, with the health department with daily COVID updates to update, a lot of different things that they're dealing with, including deaths, number of cases, confirmed cases, hospitals flattening the curve, all of that stuff. He wanted to separate this announcement from that. This is one of the big announcements. So aside from all of these daily briefings we've had for weeks and weeks now, there are only a few that are really momentous. This would be one of them. when you declare a peacetime emergency, when you talk about the stay-at-home order, when you're kind of dialing back a little bit on businesses or keeping restrictions tight on businesses. That's why he wanted to do it. He didn't want it to link it to the health department today, so they just started to run out of time. Got a lot of lawyers working on this stuff, not making this up, just trying to figure out what to do, kind of figure out what's legal, and that's another reason. So they're going to try to do it during the news hours of all of the stations and see if it reaches more people.
All right, and the highlights, do we know yet? Are you convinced that you know what he's going to tell us? What will be the key talking points this evening that will get people's attention?
Yeah, in general, what we're going to hear is this. The governor is going to use his authority to extend for another 30 days the peacetime emergency because of the coronavirus pandemic. So it expires today. He's going to extend it to mid-June. He can do it for 30 days. And then we're going to find out some stuff about this stay-at-home order, which is separate from the emergency declaration. Right. So he will very likely dial that back a little bit. That is set to expire on May 18th, and that's next week. And the big mystery will be if he extends it for another 2 weeks or another month. Just from the things that I'm hearing today, he's going to dial it back and for now not extend the stay-at-home. But he still has the power to keep businesses closed. That's different from stay-at-home. And to restrict public movements, like where you can go, what's open, what's closed. So just to make this very clear, the stay-at-home order is just telling us all to stay at home. The peacetime emergency allows him to put restrictions on business and also to restrict public movement, and he'll still have that ability going forward.
The question is whether how far he's going to continue to exercise it. We quoted our guy Blois Olson saying that he is hearing that basically businesses will be allowed, many businesses will be allowed to open to 50%. Now, it was a little vague on the wording. Is that possible? Do you think there's a chance that more businesses are going to have? The big question, as you know, have been, okay, some of the box stores like Costco has been open all along as a necessity, Targets, et cetera. The question was whether, all right, we're going to loosen it up for the littler businesses who say, hey, we need a piece of this too. If we have some restrictions about how many people we have in our store at any one time, whatever, is there any reason to believe that stuff will be part of the liberalization? Not a complete opening up, but that more businesses, more retail businesses might have a chance to open as opposed to the big box stores that have been open.
Yeah, that has been one of the things that has really stuck in the craw of a lot of Minnesotans, particularly outside the metro area. You got these big stores, Pomida, Menards, Home Depot. You got all of these big stores open. But then you don't have the mom and pop shops in small-town Minnesota that have been allowed to open. The boutique shops, the butcher shops, those kinds of places, even though they could practice social distancing very well. And that's what I think you're going to be hearing tonight from Governor Walz, dialing back to allow a little more of that kind of thing. I can't speak exactly to what Blois Olson has been saying. I trust that he's got great sources and all of that. I think we're going to start hearing from the governor tonight, perhaps dialing up a little bit how many people can gather in a certain place, like in a store, maybe at a graduation party. There's still going to be very small numbers. I think what you will not hear tonight is the openings of some large businesses like bars and restaurants immediately is what I'm saying, not right away. Bowling alleys, those kinds of things, hair salons. You're not going to see that opening right away when the stay-at-home order is set to expire on May 18th. But you are going to, and we're not going to see anything about ball games, football, those concerts, those kinds of large gatherings. But I think they're trying to figure out a way to keep the emergency in place in case we need it, and yet loosen the restrictions on everyday life for businesses around the state.
My understanding is you have some breaking news out of the state of one of our neighboring states, the state of Wisconsin, correct?
Yeah, that's true. Just in the last few minutes, just as we're coming on the air, the Wisconsin Supreme Court has overturned Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers' stay-at-home order. That's a big deal. He had instituted a stay-at-home order like Minnesota in April. It went through May, and he extended it to the end of May.
Right.
The Wisconsin Supreme Court has overturned that order and given him 6 days to figure out a way to get out of it. So that's a pretty big defeat. The Republicans in the legislature went to court in Wisconsin on behalf of people, constituents, they said, needed to stay open or be open. So that is kind of, are we going to be seeing that around the country? Let's pay attention to this. Is that a signal of the way it's going to go in other states, including states like Minnesota? So that's where it is right now. That was a surprise to me. I didn't expect it today. And you figure in the pandemic that the courts kind of give leeway to the legislators. But according to the court, this Democratic governor overstepped his bounds.
It seems like almost every court case, it was a 4-3 vote in favor of the overturning. The ruling, according to the story I'm looking at, does not mean that the order is immediately void. Right. Republicans had sought a temporary injunction, as you say, to block the extension with 6-day stay to give state health officials time to go through the rulemaking process. The court, controlled 5-2 by conservative justices, granted the injunction and the 6-day stay. The order will remain in effect until May 20. Iowa is, I believe, I read today, opening up everything Friday. I mean, basically, everything's up. You want a massage? Go to Iowa. Not a problem. Just, have at it.
You want a tattoo?
You want a tattoo? You want to get your hair done?
Tattoo?
Yeah. Well, you want to get your hair done and a tattoo at the same time. You can do all of that as well. Is there any reason to believe that what's going on in the bordering states, although, Wisconsin, the effort was made to keep it closed. Now, this is a court ruling that's attempting to overturn it, that it is added in your mind, whether it should or not, that it has those sorts of things. When neighboring states go a different direction, it adds to the heat on Governor Walz and factors into that he's opening it up as much as he may be announcing at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, we are all the same people. Everybody here in the Midwest, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, the Dakotas. And so everybody's getting pretty antsy here. I think Iowa is going quite a bit farther than the surrounding states. I think they're opening up salons and even fitness centers like gyms.
Yeah, fitness centers too, correct.
Rooms.
Yep.
But all of these, and that's a Republican governor there. We have a Democratic governor. Wisconsin's got a Democratic governor. So we're in a place here where everybody's trying to look at the data, look at the science, and some people believe, like in Iowa, that they can be safe and still open. The data seems to show that if you open everything up, particularly if you open it up too fast and too much in too many places, that this virus is going to explode again. And that's the big, and then you got to dial it down. Then you got to shut it all down again. And that's the big tightrope that all of these governors are walking. It'd be great if Iowa's right and they can control this virus and kind of contain it and flatten the curve and lower the number of deaths and all of that. And so that will be a great experiment, a grand experiment to watch. I don't see that happening here soon, and by soon I mean by the end of May.
Right.
But I can say I would say by June, perhaps by mid-June, we will see some of these same kinds of establishments opening up.
That was segment number 1 with Pat Kessler and Dan Barreiro. If you'd like segment number 2, where they flesh out a little bit more about what the governor was scheduled to say tonight, you can podcast that on this very same channel in the entire show podcast. On Thursday's show, we open up Dr. Dan's inbox if you'd like to get in on the fun. JG at KFAN.com. The Rubes have come up big the last few months. because they've had more time. Let's be honest. They've had more time to craft their letters, and we definitely appreciate their contributions each and every week. The inbox is open tomorrow at 4:30. Thanks for listening to us on the podcast. Make sure to listen to us live if you can, 3 to 6:30 right here on the Fan or your iHeartRadio app. You can always stream us. You can always podcast, and we thank you for listening during this quarantine time. Stay safe, stay home. We'll talk to you soon.